Get out. Escort this man now. That was the order, loud, cruel, and shameless, thrown across a luxury showroom like broken glass. And the man they threw out? He wasn't homeless. He wasn't violent. He wasn't even loud. He was the CEO, the owner, the man whose signature paid every salary in the room. But no one knew that, not yet. They just saw his skin, his sneakers, and his silence, and that was enough. But first, leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Marcus Washington stepped into his own dealership like a quiet storm, unassuming, soft-spoken, dressed in a plain navy polo and jeans that had seen more grocery aisles than boardrooms. He drove a Honda Civic that morning not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because on this particular day, Marcus wasn't showing up as the billionaire CEO of a national auto empire. He was just a dad, a father trying to buy a graduation gift for his daughter. But the moment he walked through those glass doors, it was like someone had flipped a switch on the atmosphere. Conversations didn't stop, but they stuttered. Eyes lingered, jaws clenched with polite suspicion. It wasn't the showroom that changed. It was the people inside it. They saw a black man who didn't dress like money, and in their minds, that meant he didn't belong. That contrast wasn't just visual, it was visceral. Marcus looked like a comma in a sentence full of exclamation points. Calm. Steady. Out of place. He walked past Italian marble floors, past cars that cost more than some people's homes, past champagne flutes clinking behind sales counters. He paused in front of a midnight blue BMW M8, his daughter's dream car. He ran his fingers along the polished hood like he was touching hope itself, but hope didn't last long in this showroom. It vanished the moment Derek Morrison, the floor manager, swaggered over like a guard dog in a silk tie. Derek looked Marcus up and down with the kind of disgust that only feels justified when you're certain no one will challenge it. "Sir," he said, drawing out the word like it tasted bitter, "I don't think you realize where you are." Marcus met his eyes calmly. "I know exactly where I am. I'm interested in that BMW." Derek laughed. Not the kind of laugh that invites others to join in, but the kind that gives them permission to. And they did. Like wildfire over dry, privileged grass, the laughter spread through the staff. A performance had begun, and Marcus had been cast as the joke. At the reception desk, Kesha Davis, 3 months into her job and the only other black person on staff, froze. She'd seen microaggressions in this place before, little slights, long stares. But this was fire in the open. Derek's voice rose. "That car's $145,000. Maybe you'd be more comfortable down at the Honda lot." Brad, another salesman, wandered over with a champagne flute in hand. "Need help showing our guest the way out, Derek?" Marcus didn't flinch. Didn't shout. Didn't swing. He just said, "I'd like to speak with someone else." Derek smiled like a butcher before the cut. "I'm the someone you speak to, and you're wasting everyone's time." The room was quiet now. Customers were watching. A well-dressed woman whispered to her husband, "He's bringing down the atmosphere." The man nodded. Management should screen who they let in. What would you do in that moment? Would you raise your voice, demand justice, storm out in fury? Or would you do what Marcus did, stand there and absorb every insult like armor, because you knew something no one else did? That you owned the ground they were standing on, that their names were inked on contracts you had the power to shred. He looked around that showroom and saw the faces of employees whose salaries he approved, mocking a man they believed was beneath them. And still, he didn't raise his voice. He simply pulled out his phone, his heart sinking. Security was already coming, summoned not for violence, but for presence. That was Marcus' crime, being present. And as the guard approached, the final insult came, "Get out, escort this man now." And Marcus nodded. Not because he agreed, not because he was afraid, but because he was finished. For now. As the glass doors closed behind him and Derek strutted back inside, Marcus typed one short message to his assistant. Emergency board meeting, 1 hour, something you need to see. He left the building, but not the battle. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Marcus didn't drive away in silence. He drove away with purpose, humming beneath the wheels of his Honda Civic. As Derek puffed his chest inside, bragging to Brad about putting that guy in his place, Marcus's message had already hit inboxes that didn't take Derek's calls. The subject line alone, emergency board meeting, 1 hour, was enough to clear schedules. These were not people who rescheduled Marcus Washington. These were people who reacted when he moved. And while Derek savored his perceived victory like stale champagne, Marcus was en route to transform humiliation into a restructuring plan. That's the thing about real power. It rarely announces itself with noise. It whispers first, then it roars. Back in the dealership, the security guard Tony Martinez arrived with silent authority. Tony wasn't just muscle, he was mind. 15 years in private security had trained him to read more in body language than in words. And what he saw unsettled him. Marcus wasn't angry, he wasn't confrontational. He was composed, controlled. That's when Tony hesitated, just long enough to hear Marcus say, "I understand. You're just doing your job. But remember this moment. It wasn't a threat, it was a prophecy. One that echoed with the weight of someone used to watching kings fall. Not because they were challenged, but because they never realized someone was watching. Power doesn't always come with an entourage. Sometimes it shows up in worn sneakers and leaves breadcrumbs before it returns with fire." Inside, Kesha stood behind the reception desk with her clipboard clutched like a life raft. Her heart hadn't stopped racing since Marcus had been walked out. She kept hearing Derek's voice in her head, loud, smug, weaponized. And over that noise, her own thoughts swirled. If silence is safety, what is truth worth? She had seen enough in her 26 years to know when someone was being railroaded. But this was a public shaming so blatant it scorched. She remembered her training session on customer engagement. We welcome every guest with dignity and interest, but today the rule wasn't broken, it was burned. And still, she stayed quiet. Because she needed this job. Because she had student loans and rent. Because standing up can cost you more than sitting down. But deep inside, something cracked. Does keeping your job mean losing your soul? She thought. And if it does, then who do I become after that? Meanwhile, Derek basked. Brad recounted the story like a fishtail to a customer who nodded with smug approval. The staff circled like moths around a porch light, their laughter slicing through any lingering decency. He thought he could walk in here and what, buy that BMW? Brad chuckled. Next time we should put up a sign. This is Premier Auto Gallery, not Discount Wheels. Around them the customers grinned. One even added, maybe they should screen people at the door. And while that chorus of arrogance swelled, Marcus was quietly navigating lanes of power. One call had turned into 5. Executives were texting confirmations. Legal was reviewing contracts. HR was double-checking termination clauses, all while Derek strutted through the showroom like a peacock on borrowed feathers. The man they'd mocked had already pulled the strings that would unravel them. They didn't know it, but they had mocked the king in his own castle. And when the owner returns with the deed in his back pocket, the laughter tends to die quick. But here's what no one in that room understood. Dismissing someone based on how they look, how they sound, or where they stand isn't just bad manners, it's dangerous judgment. Every time you write someone off, you gamble against your own ignorance. What if every nobody you dismissed was actually a test you failed? What if that quiet man in the polo was your employer, your investor, your rescuer? The truth is, arrogance assumes that wisdom checks. And in a world wired for snap judgments, the ability to pause and ask, who is this, really? That's the difference between survival and downfall. If this moment made you feel something, anger, reflection, pride, then share it. Not because stories like this are rare, but because they happen too often in silence. Speak them out loud. And the next time you see someone being treated like Marcus was, ask yourself, am I watching a tragedy unfold or a reckoning begin? Exactly 1 hour after the quiet man in the polo shirt was escorted out of his own dealership, he returned, not in sneakers, but in a charcoal suit so sharp it looked like it could cut through marble. The Honda Civic was gone, replaced by a convoy of black sedans that glided into the lot like shadows with purpose. The first to step out was Marcus Washington. Behind him came 2 board members, a corporate lawyer, and Margaret Chen, the company's chief legal officer, holding a digital tablet like a sword drawn from a scabbard. Marcus didn't walk in like he wanted answers. He walked in like he was the answer. Calm, composed, utterly unreadable. He wasn't back to ask for permission. He came back not as a customer, but as the storm. And the storm, it turns out, had receipt. Inside, the atmosphere flipped like a light switch caught in a power surge. Conversations choked mid-sentence. The jazz music might as well have unplugged itself. Derek turned, mid-story, bragging again about how he put that guy in his place, only to see the same man walking through the glass doors. Except this time, Marcus had an entourage that looked like it had the authority to buy, sell, and audit the entire building. Brad's champagne suddenly lost its taste, his smirk evaporating as Margaret Chen followed behind with the weight of consequence in every step. And then Marcus spoke, clear and cutting. That man you asked security to remove this morning is me, Marcus Washington, CEO, majority shareholder of Washington Automotive Group. This dealership, it's mine, and 47 others like it. The silence in the showroom was electric. Derek's face drained of color. Brad backed up like he'd just heard a bomb ticking. And Marcus, without raising his voice, delivered the sentence that shook the entire floor. You called security on the owner. Margaret Chen stepped forward with a tone that carried legal steel. Mr. Morrison, Mr. Chen, effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Your behavior constitutes a direct violation of the company's anti-discrimination and customer treatment policies. The words weren't just cold, they were final. Derek stammered. Brad opened his mouth, but nothing came out except panic. The cruelty they once wielded with such ease now looked pathetic even. The public humiliation they enjoyed at Marcus's expense was now boomeranging with the full weight of corporate accountability, and no one, not the smirking customers, not the gossiping employees, moved a muscle. This wasn't theater anymore, it was judgment, and the applause had been replaced by silence. Across the showroom, the same elderly white couple who'd whispered poison just hours before stood frozen. The woman, who once clutched her pearls in disdain, now clutched her husband's arm in horror. Marcus turned to them, not with anger, but with a quiet gravity that cut deeper than any insult. You laughed at a man asking to buy a gift for his daughter, he said, a father trying to honor his child's success, and you treated that as comedy. The couple couldn't respond. Their shame was louder than their excuses, and maybe for the first time in their lives, they had to sit in it, without defense, without deflection. Just truth, staring back in a tailored suit. Marcus then turned to Keisha, still at the reception desk, visibly trembling but standing tall. You saw, he said, his voice softer now. You cared. Her eyes welled with tears, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen, of knowing she had almost said something. Almost acted. You don't need power to have impact, Marcus continued. You only need the courage to speak when silence is safest. And in that moment, every person in the room felt the weight of that truth. Some shifted with guilt, others with resolve, but no one walked away unchanged. So here's the question for you watching this unfold. When someone around you is mistreated, humiliated, discarded based on how they look or what they wear, will you laugh along? Will you stay quiet to keep your seat at the table? Or will you be the one who sees the man behind the moment, the story behind the silence. Because justice doesn't just show up in courtrooms. It shows up in showrooms, in offices, in classrooms, and sidewalks. And when it knocks, it doesn't always look like a CEO. Sometimes it looks like the man you just shoved out the door. If you believe power without compassion is just cowardice in a suit, then share this story, speak it, own it. Because poetic justice is real, but only if we're brave enough to write the ending ourselves. The Premier Auto Gallery didn't change overnight, but it changed. What had once been a temple of quiet elitism became something far more powerful. A blueprint for accountability. The first order of business was mandatory inclusion training. Not the kind stuffed into a PDF and forgotten, but face-to-face workshops where discomfort was no longer dodged but dissected. Every employee had to confront their own reflection, not just in the showroom mirrors, but in their daily interaction. And when Marcus stood before them in that first company-wide session, he didn't preach, he pressed. "We don't just sell luxury here," he said. "We model it, and there's nothing luxurious about humiliation." Some staff walked out. A few submitted resignations with hollow excuses. But others stayed and grew. They asked questions they'd been too afraid to ask before. They listened instead of defended. The culture didn't just shift, it shed skin. Like scrubbing smoke-stained walls after a fire, the effort was hard, messy, and absolutely necessary. A few days later, Marcus called Kesha into his office. She walked in like someone still unsure she belonged in the building, let alone the room. But Marcus looked up from his desk with the kind of gaze that builds bridges. "Leadership," he told her, "isn't about loud voices, it's about loud hearts." She blinked back the tears. 3 months ago, she was the silent receptionist watching racism unfold. Today, she was being offered the general manager position. Her voice, once a whisper in her own head, now carried the weight of decision-making. And as she signed the paperwork, her hands were steady. Confidence doesn't come from titles. It comes from being told for the first time, "You were right to care." The next morning, Marcus addressed the dealership's entire team in a closed-door staff meeting. But it wasn't a lecture, it was a recalibration. "What happened here," he began, "was not a fluke. It was a reflection, and now we change the mirror." He laid out a new policy. Dignity was no longer optional, it was policy. Every customer, every guest, every employee would be treated with respect regardless of appearance, accent, or assumption. The board backed it. Legal sealed it, and Marcus ended with a line that turned heads. "This isn't charity, it's clarity. We're not fixing a problem, we're redefining who we are." That wasn't just a mission statement. It was a gauntlet thrown at the feet of an old way of doing business and daring the future to step forward. And then the real test began. A black couple walked in one afternoon, the kind of clients Derek would have dismissed on sight, but now they were greeted with a smile, offered espresso, and shown luxury options like royalty. A young Latino man in paint-splattered work clothes walked in hesitantly. A few weeks earlier, he would have been eyed like a thief. Today, he left in a leased Porsche, with a handshake and a thank you. It wasn't just sales techniques that had evolved. It was the tone, the way people listened, the way they looked you in the eye. The showroom hadn't gotten quieter, it had gotten real, and for the first time in years, it felt like the cars weren't the most valuable things in the room. The people were. By the end of the month, the dealership felt like it had gone through a second grand opening, but it wasn't the marble or the lighting that had changed. It was the air. The old Premier Auto Gallery didn't survive. It had to burn for something better to grow. Now, what stood in its place wasn't just a dealership, it was a message, one built into every transaction and tucked inside every handshake. Dignity is not for sale. It's the standard. So ask yourself, what would your workplace look like if respect wasn't just a slogan on a poster, but a practice in every corner? What would your life feel like if you knew every space you entered would see you fully and treat you fairly? That's not a fantasy. That's a decision. If this story stirred you, then do something simple but bold. Bring it up at work, at dinner, in the mirror, because change starts not when the rules are rewritten, but when hearts decide they no longer belong to the silence. 3 weeks after the storm had passed and the walls were scrubbed clean, Premier Auto Gallery looked almost identical on the surface. Gleaming chrome, polished marble, that same lazy jazz humming through the ceiling speakers. But today, something different pulled up to the lot. It wasn't the convoy of boardroom power or the caution of change. It was celebration. Jasmine Washington stepped out of her rideshare, wearing a tailored white blazer and heels that clicked with intention. She didn't walk like someone who was arriving, she walked like someone who belonged. At 25, she'd just earned her MBA from Harvard Business School, and yet her presence carried something more than credentials. It carried clarity. Marcus watched her from inside the glass doors, arms crossed, heart pounding, not with pride alone, but with awe. "She carries my legacy," he murmured to himself, "not my scars." When Marcus led Jasmine to the center of the showroom, her eyes locked on the midnight blue BMW M8 parked like a crown jewel. She smiled, but then she paused, because it wasn't just a car, it was a statement, a symbol. A seed planted in blood, watered in silence, and now blooming in justice. "Is this the one?" she asked, her voice soft but sure. Marcus nodded, slipping her the keys. "The keys open more than doors," he said quietly. Their eyes met. Jasmine didn't ask what he meant, not because she didn't understand, but because she did, in full. What should have been a smooth father-daughter celebration now held the weight of everything Marcus had fought through. She wasn't just receiving a car. She was inheriting a reminder. Before the paperwork was finalized, Jasmine turned to Kesha, who now stood with her back straight and her badge polished. "You stood up," she said. "That matters more than horsepower." The two women exchanged a glance that said more than words ever could. A shared understanding. Two black women in a space that had once tried to erase them, now running it, buying from it, owning their space within it. That's the thing about courage. It may not stop the storm, but it clears enough sky for someone else to rise. Kesha nodded. "Your father gave me a shot. I'm not wasting it." Jasmine smiled. That's leadership. Not the suit, not the title. The voice that says, "I see you, I believe in better." Marcus stepped aside and let them talk, watching with a silent pride that came not from power, but from purpose. "I built this," he reflected, "to give her the world. Turns out, she needed to see what that world still hides." The lesson wasn't just about economics or excellence. It was about evidence. Evidence that no matter how successful you become, the world will still try to tell you where you don't belong. And when it does, you have a choice. Accept it or expose it. Marcus had exposed it. And now, in this moment of celebration, he realized that Jasmine's greatest inheritance wasn't the car. It was the clarity, the truth that dignity isn't something you wait for, it's something you walk in with, even when others can't see it. As Jasmine drove the BMW off the lot, the engine humming like a quiet roar, Marcus stayed behind. He didn't need to follow her. She knew where she was going, and besides, his work here wasn't finished. He looked around the dealership and saw staff members helping customers without judgment. Saw the new code of conduct posted behind every desk. Saw respect, not as a policy, but as practice. And in that still moment, he whispered to himself, "Sometimes the gift isn't what you hand over. It's what you leave behind." So here's your invitation. What legacy are you building with your daily choices, not in grand speeches, but in silent moments? When you witness injustice, when you have the chance to lift someone, or when you simply decide to treat someone as human before anything else. This isn't about cars. It's about character. If this story lit something in you, share it. Tell someone. Pass it forward. Because dignity only becomes a standard when enough people stop treating it like an upgrade. 6 months later, Premier Auto Gallery didn't just look the same. It looked earned. The same glass doors shimmered in the California sun. The same Italian marble shined underfoot. And yes, the same soft jazz trickled from the overhead speakers. But now, that jazz didn't feel like a velvet rope between classes, it felt like a welcome mat. Under Kesha's leadership, employee turnover dropped to its lowest level in years. Customer satisfaction surged. The dealership was being studied by other branches across the country, not for its sales strategy, but for its culture. Once a cautionary tale of unchecked bias, it had become a living example of what happens when companies choose courage over comfort. But the most unexpected headline came when a viral video surfaced, a young Latino father, tearful and stunned, receiving the keys to his dream car from a smiling, attentive salesperson. "They treated me like I mattered," he said. "I didn't think that happened in places like this." The comments section didn't explode in outrage. It exploded in hope. On one particularly warm morning, Marcus returned to the dealership, not in a suit, not in dress shoes, but in the same navy polo and worn sneakers he wore the day he was humiliated. Only this time, no one flinched, no one stared, no one sized him up. Customers of every race and walk of life browsed the floor comfortably, receiving service that was sharp, respectful, and sincere. A white teenager asked for a test drive. A black grandmother got coffee while finalizing paperwork. An immigrant couple spoke in Spanish to a multilingual employee who matched their energy, not their accent. And over all of it, the same jazz played softly, not like background noise, but like permission. What changed? Not just policy, not just staff, hearts, systems, expectations. That's the real transformation, not when people memorize rules, but when they rewrite them from the inside out. Marcus stepped outside and looked up at the sky. Jasmine was now 3 months into running her own startup, a fintech platform focused on closing equity gaps in underserved communities. She'd just landed a major funding round, and she'd done it while mentoring 5 black women starting their own ventures. Marcus didn't beam with pride. He stood still, in quiet knowing. Because the truth is, stories like this don't live in headlines. They live in habits, in who you hire, in how you look at someone when they walk into a room. They live in the moments no one's recording. They echo through lives that were never supposed to be centered. Marcus didn't need applause, he needed alignment. And now, as he watched the dealership operate without needing his supervision, he knew something rare had occurred. The change wasn't just structural, it was spiritual. A place once poisoned by prejudice had healed into a house of honor. So now it's your turn. You don't need to be a CEO to change a culture. You don't need a boardroom or a title or a press release. You only need to own your courage. Because every system, every workplace, every school and sidewalk is shaped by what people tolerate. If you've ever stayed silent when someone got disrespected, ask yourself why. If you've ever let your assumptions walk ahead of your empathy, ask yourself what it cost, and then choose better. Speak up. Say something. Even a whisper of decency can grow into thunder when enough people echo it. Marcus didn't start a revolution. He corrected a reflection. One that stared back at every person in that room and asked, "Is this who we are?" And for the first time, someone answered, "Not anymore." Discrimination isn't just bad business. It's a broken mirror. It reflects not the person being judged, but the soul of the one doing the judging. And Marcus made the glass reflect. If you saw yourself in this story, if you recognized a moment you failed to speak or a moment you found your voice, don't let it end here. Share it. Start a conversation. Spark a change in your own corner of the world, because every legacy worth remembering begins with one brave moment that refuses to be forgotten. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.